Hello, and welcome to The People's AI, presented by Vana. I'm your host, Jeff Wilser, and today we are going deep into the world of DeFi plus AI, and we'll have an in-depth interview with one of the main builders in this space, Renç Korzay, the co-founder of Giza. And my partner in creating this podcast is Vana, whose vision is user-owned AI through user-owned data. Vana's mission is to be the world's first open protocol for data sovereignty. So at a high level, the People's AI is all about decentralized AI, which is loosely thought of as an intersection of AI and Web3 or AI and crypto. Today, we are exploring a very specific slice of Web3 plus AI, and that is the intersection of AI and DeFi. And on crypto Twitter, the way that DeFi plus AI has been spelled is kind of an overly cute wink wink DEFAI, which looks kind of nice on paper. The downside, in my opinion at least, is in conversation when you spell it DEFAI, that is pronounced DeFi, or exactly the same as DEFI, DeFi. So anyway, DeFi versus DeFi, one with AI, one with not AI. So we'll roll with that confusion. We'll work through it. We're fine. So I just wanted to get that confusion out of the way. But here's the deal. Why does this matter? What is this all about? Well, as Renç explains in our conversation, at a very high level, in some ways, DeFi, with no A, it's regular old DeFi, is not working how we thought it would. Yes, if you're a hardcore crypto native, you can nerd out and figure out all of the technical ins and outs and optimize your yield across 37 different protocols. Cool. But that takes time, that takes expertise, and honestly, it's not something that normies are going to do. The original spirit of DeFi, though, and I've been covering the space a long time at CoinDesk, writing about it for years, is to make the financial system more accessible, more inclusive than traditional banking, not some complicated game that only insiders understand. So, can AI fix the problem? The idea is that while human beings might struggle with the mechanics and intricacies of DeFi, this is something that AI agents could do in their sleep, or literally while you sleep. And the way that Renç and others see it, AI can restore the early promise of DeFi to let people say in plain English what they want to do with their money, and then the AI will translate that and do the rest. In theory, this is better for the users, better for the platforms, and could finally bring widespread adoption to DeFi. And it could let you, the user, just at a snap, figure out the best way to optimize your money, best way to spend your capital, best way to manage risk, the best way to provide safeguards to your assets. That's in theory. We explore all of that and more. So please enjoy my conversation with Renç Korzay, the co-founder of Giza. Renç, welcome to the People's AI.
Great to be here. Thank you so much for having me, Jeff. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, thanks. I really enjoyed our conversation in Denver at the panel of intersection of AI and DeFi. I just wanted to go deeper. So that's what we are doing today. I love your comments back on that panel. And let's start with the kind of the basics and the baseline. Now, I'm guessing most listeners here have a general sense of a topic, but just to make sure we're on the same page, how are you defining, and actually, how do you pronounce DEFAI, right? Is it just pronounced DeFi? Is there some other kind of trick to this?
I wish I could tell you. I wish I could tell you how to pronounce it. And it is great that we're starting with trying to define it, because there's obviously a lot of things that are being pushed into it. In general, in this intersection of AI and crypto, there's a huge amount of population that wants to take one super popular technology and another super popular technology in blockchain, AI, blockchain, kind of like mash it together. Mm-hmm. And people think there's a lot of money to be made in the middle, and there's a lot of speculation to be made in the middle. And there's nothing wrong with speculation either. It drives economical growth that allows for innovation in the end. In the intersection of decentralized finance and artificial intelligence is this concept of DeFi AI, and it presents a fundamental shift in how markets operate and how users interact with complex financial systems. This thesis is coming from the idea, especially for us at Giza, is that the markets as we know it, especially in Web3, they have evolved beyond what humans are capable of. There is a huge amount of volume of data that requires 24/7 monitoring, multiple landing protocols, multiple chains, fragmentation that we have never seen likes of, new strategies, new stable coins that are coming up on a daily basis that represent different risk parameters. All of this creates this improbable cognitive barrier for individual participants. And this is one of the growing pains of DeFi that we are seeing. DeFi, as we have known...
Sorry, just to confirm, when you say growing pains of DeFi, are you referring to DeFi with no A or DeFi with the AI?
I think no A, no AI.
Right. So just to level set before, to kind of no, this is really helpful. So it's almost like defining the problem before we even get to AI, right? So it's kind of like that's I think it's important to level set that there actually is a real challenge here in the world before AI, right? And that's that DeFi, in theory, so much of it is elegance and equitable, and it provides this kind of like less friction, more liquidity, allowing people to do all these novel financial things in theory. But the reality is, to your point, it's often so effing complex. It's hard for human beings to actually use it properly because it can be very mechanical, very manual. And you're like, oh shit, I have these 37 different protocols that could work right here. It might take a lot of time to go through and figure out which of these 37 makes sense, right? So that's kind of like, that's a state of play of DeFi with no A before we get to AI. Am I getting that right?
Yeah, for sure. You're kind of hitting the nail on the head. It's important to like problematize first and then build solutions after, which is something that we don't often do in Web3. We kind of like build a solution and try to fit many problems into it.
Yes.
But in this case of DeFi, there is like a growing pain because this DeFi, let's start from like the ideological perspective. When we first heard of DeFi, when it was first presented, the biggest promise that it made was like permissionless finance, where anybody can get finance and you don't have to be stuck to barriers. You can just access anything at any time. And it was like kind of like this liberation of financial movements that was promised. The growing pain part comes from the fact that over the years we have built more and more sophisticated DeFi instruments, as it should be. We have built more and more complex products, as it should be, taking on more and more complex challenges like the Aves, the Pandos, the Morphos of the world. But at the same time, one of the things that we fell short on was, as we built more and more sophisticated products, we failed to make them more and more usable. As we built more sophisticated products, they became more and more complex to use. So what happened was that we started from this huge promise of decentralized finance for everybody. Then the products got better and better. However, the audience that you started to serve also shrank to a point where you only serve the people who are capable of conducting these quite complex instruments that are great. It doesn't allow for mass participation to happen. So this is the ideological part of it.
Yeah, I think it's a great rundown. Is it fair to say, broadly speaking, that most of the folks using and interacting with DeFi with no A at the moment are primarily crypto natives that are doing things like yield farming, right? That are not like, because the promise was always, oh, thanks to DeFi with no A, you can have clever financial instruments like lend or borrow a loan against your home equity in a more frictionless way than going to a bank and paying all kinds of fees and so on, right? Yeah. That's not really happening in any kind of mainstream way. It's mostly folks who are like, oh, cool, if I have this much ETH, this much BTC, I want to stake it on this protocol, earn like a 5% yield here and take that yield and leverage it somehow and get 7% there, flip that 7 to get 9% there, and so on, right? That's kind of the DeFi with no A world we're in right now. And the hope is that AI can help demystify this, make it smoother, make it easier to make all these transactions, and ultimately, hopefully, bring more normies on board and kind of get back to its original promise. Is that kind of how you see it?
Yeah, very much. As you mentioned, the people who can use DeFi right now are the ones that are intellectually capable of understanding different mechanisms and different interfaces and doing some napkin math here and there to really understand where to go. And with this kind of approach, you also create like a complexity asymmetry, like an information asymmetry that starts favoring only this group of people. Only this group of people with advanced infrastructure, only this group of people that has an advanced understanding of DeFi protocols, that is going towards directly undermining the DeFi's core promise of like open, permissionless access to any kind of financial system. And adjacent to that, if you had to go like one step further, for me, DeFi is the biggest market fit of blockchain technology, if not the only market fit of blockchain technology. And as long as you serve this technology to a sophisticated group of people and not a wider audience who can conduct it, you're always going to be stuck with the same amount of people. You have had probably like thousands of these podcasts, and you have had probably tens of different founders who come in and gave you the promise of, we are going to be the ones who's bringing the next billion users to Web3. The next billion users to Web3 cannot come to Web3 with the current products, with the current culture of this like serving a nuanced group of people. So how do we break the barriers? How we truly bring new capital, new users, as you mentioned, to Web3 goes through this intersection of AI and decentralized finance, where the complexity disappears and everything becomes accessible for everyone.
Great segue and great kind of orientation of why this matters. Let's talk now about AI. And AI enters the chat, so to speak, right? So we have this problem with DeFi. Let's start at a high level. At a high level, yes, AI could help eliminate and reduce some of these pain points and complexities. But what are we talking about here? Is that through AI agents? Is that like through slicker UI? Kind of what are the main ways that AI can help fundamentally improve the ecosystem of DeFi and bring it back to its original roots and make it more useful for all?
Yeah, I think that's a very, very good question. And it's like a multi-layered answer. And we can start with like the retail part and the user side of things, and we can slowly transition into more fundamental impacts that bringing intelligence and bringing automation can do for like a market like DeFi, which is decentralized, which is 24/7, and see like what the impact can be there. From a pure user perspective, as we mentioned, currently, in order for me to find the best yield or the best opportunity, I need to go through an hours of onboarding process to any given protocol. I need to understand the ins and outs of it. I need to decipher these huge complex interfaces. I need to then constantly monitor where the best potential opportunity is going to be. And once that part is through, there is the operational side of things. Like, there are certain concepts that makes DeFi, and these concepts are things that humans are really not good at taking into account. These concepts are like gas costs, slippage fees, how do you monitor, how do you optimize operations between landing protocols, how can you be profitable, and like the fundamental parts of it. We are not really tuned to be executing financial operations. So both from like a cognitive perspective and both from a profitability perspective, we are hitting a bit of a wall. And the first use case when it comes to bringing AI into decentralized finance is this transforming how users interact with complex financial systems. Traditional interfaces in DeFi, they require users to understand all of these technical operations, and we are bringing a new interface, which is in the form of an autonomous agent, a financial autonomous agent, that bridges this gap and enables what we call intent-driven interactions, where users are not...
Sorry, say it one more time, please.
By enabling what we call intent-driven financial interactions, where we go from expecting users to know exactly what they need to do, how they need to do it, tokens, chains, protocols, all of these things, and we just want a desired outcome, such as I want better yield on my stablecoins, or I want better yield on my ETH, or I want to provide liquidity to XYZ. And from that moment onwards, a financial autonomous agent takes that intent and provides the strategy, executes the strategy flawlessly with all of the things that humans are not great into taking into account. And this dramatically expands, one, what a human can do with its capital, two, expands DeFi's addressable market by making these sophisticated strategies accessible to non-technical users. So at the very first layer, completely changing how capital flows from the user side to the protocols and to the ecosystems is the number one thing that it will solve, and it is solving from purely retail perspective.
It's almost like by analogy in the world of coding, right? There's a trend in the last few weeks of like, quote, vibe-based coding, right? So even non-coders can say, well, I kind of want to create this game that looks like this 1980s classic game, Jump Joe or whatever. And then through just kind of chatting, you can code without having that technical knowledge, right? Similarly, you could do that with financial transactions. And I'm guessing, Renç, you can even have like a range of fluency, right? Maybe you said if your user wants to maximize yields, I'm guessing you could even go, like, in theory, you could even have less fluency than that. Someone can be like, have kind of a Fisher Price, my very first finance level of understanding, and not even quite know what maximizing yield means. Say, well, I have this much money, I want to get some kind of return on it, but my risk tolerance is very low. So what is the safest way to eke out a bit more money? And it could translate that, or they say, hey, I have this much money, but hell, it's funty money. I'm not really using it's this money I'm okay risking. It's like whatevs, YOLO. So I want you to find the most high risk, high reward thing, right? And give it this very high level, intense, and then it could perhaps go back and forth with you. Say, okay, just to make sure I understand you. You're saying you're comfortable with the loss of principal. You're saying, what's your time frame? Are you looking to do this over a 3-year time horizon or a 3-minute micro scalping time horizon, right? It's almost like in plain English, having a conversation with these AI agents to understand what your intent is, and then having the smarts and ability to go out in the entire kind of sprawling world of DeFi and figure out the best way to optimize that strategy.
Yeah, for sure. 100%. It's interesting that you're giving the vibe coding experience. It's like a new terminology is, we can coin it here, is vibe finance.
Vibe finance.
Obviously, like, you are much more careful with your finances and you don't want to vibe so much with it. You still want to go towards an objective. And this is where what you mentioned comes really into play. Like, you can vibe your finance into being more performant and being more secure with these financial autonomous agents that we're bringing, because we discussed like all of the things that humans are terrible at in terms of like monitoring, in terms of fragmentation, in terms of execution. But the other thing that we are terrible at is like risk management and security of our capital. And this can be offloaded to an agent which can follow your basic instructions. An agent can significantly improve your risk management in DeFi by continuously monitoring protocol health. It will detect anomalies for you, and it will put in an emergency protocol. It will monitor your position, and if it exceeds that threshold that you mentioned, it will move you to a more risk-averse solution. So overall, as you vibe through your finance, you can actually get a much more secure and performant outcome from your capital, and that is like a pretty good value proposition for the users as well.
No, that's really interesting. I also feel that there's some concerns and risks there. We'll get to those in a minute. But before we do, what is the current state of play of this world, right? What's possible right now? How would you describe the early, crude kind of basics? That is, if a listener to this podcast wanted to, right after this podcast, create accounts, get their AI agents to help them vibe finance, what can they do right now? And what do you see as what are the gaps? We still haven't gotten X, Y, and Z. We're still working on this.
Yeah, for sure. I can start with what is available now. What is available now is, for example, at what we do, at what we bring to the table, we have built Giza as an infrastructure that enables these autonomous financial markets. These autonomous financial markets are conducted by these new financial species, the new financial autonomous agents that conducts your capital for you, takes smarter decisions for you, and creates capital efficiency for everyone involved. We have built the first financial autonomous agent in Web3, and that's called Arma. And Arma is enabling 24/7 stablecoin yield optimization across multiple lending protocols, which is the first of its class. It is available now, and it is the door towards unlocking many other use cases. What is the paradigm shift is that, similar to all of the things that we have been discussing and the example that you have given, I have my $1,000. I want better return on this, and this is all I care about, and this is all I should know to get better return on this. This is what we facilitate. You go to arma.xyz and you deposit your $1,000, and depending on your size, on your preference, on your requirements, Arma finds the most profitable position for you, scanning an entire ecosystem of opportunities, and it will continuously move your capital to a better and better position. So this is continuous capital optimization without you having to micromanage every single movement. What this brings is a couple of things. One is this new world of where you can give your capital to an agent, and you don't have to go to Morpho, you don't have to go to Aave to get the best of Aave and get the best of Morpho. You don't have to know Base to be onboarded to Base, and you don't have to understand the quite complex APY parameters to really see I'm getting 7%, 8%, 10% return on my money. Abstraction of financial operations. Two, it brings a layer of personalization that we did not have in DeFi so far. Everything in DeFi has been one size fits all vault-like solutions where it is great for capital efficiency, but the vaults, for example, they no longer give us the financial sophistication that we desire in 2025. They are not prone to dynamic decision frameworks. They cannot really leverage new opportunities that are coming up in the market. The financial agents that we build are very much working for you and for you only. So if this user brings their $1,000, that $1,000 is never mixed with another person's money. It executes only for them. They can tailor what their agents should do. They can pick their protocols. And this level of personalization for the first time comes into a good picture because there is a fundamental shift happening between the relationship between the users and the decentralized protocols. So far, the users were enslaved by the decentralized protocols to their rules, to their guidelines. Now it's the other way around. The decentralized protocols needs to shift their mindset and fit the preferences of the users. So going towards a more user-centric financial market is a huge leap, and it is being enabled right now. And these are some of the stuff that is currently possible. You can use it. It is closely right now managing close to $1 million on base, and it has generated close to $6 million in volume because it is constantly taking this money across different protocols within base. So that's another part of this that we have yet to discuss, which is the ecosystemic shift, which is the fundamental shift. Like, how does that change?
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. And this, in theory, all sounds awesome, and it's heartening how much use case is available at the moment today. And no doubt that will continue to evolve and improve and iterate and so on. I'm guessing there are a lot of listeners, though, who are raising their hands saying, but wait a second, how do we think about risk? How do we think about, we know that AI can make mistakes. We know that AI can hallucinate. And it's one thing when I'm querying ChatGPT to ask about Civil War history and it makes up some battle that didn't exist, like, well, whatever. But something else when my capital is at play. And
sure.
What I'm especially curious about and a little concerned about is AI can and does make mistakes. And the other side of that coin, cryptocurrency and blockchain, by definition, is immutable, right? So once a transaction is made, it can't be undone, generally. So how do we square those two things? That unlike traditional finance in a bank, oh no, we sent this to the wrong place, we can undo that more or less. But famously / infamously, one of its greatest strengths and quirks, to put it delicately, in blockchain is that things can never get undone. So how do we square those two concepts to make users feel safe?
Yeah, so it's an epic question, and it is the question that needs to be addressed. And we can address it from two different perspectives. One of them is general product strategy that optimizes towards minimizing this kind of actions and this kind of risk. And the other one is technical architecture, where you have to build for security, you have to build for transparency, and these things should not just be ethical guidelines, but they are very much engineering requirements. So let's start from the first side. In terms of product strategy, there are two different solutions out there in this intersection of decentralized finance and AI currently. One of them is much more prone to the risks that you are describing, where there is like a chat interface that takes your input and you go there and you say, I want you to take my $10 from my Phantom wallet, I want you to move it to Ethereum, I want you to stake it to Aave, 50% here, 50% there. There's a bunch of different issues with this. One of the issues is that, kind of like leaning on the previous conversation that we had, it operates on what I like to call an instructions to executions model, where you as Jeff, you are still required to know exactly which step you want to take and how to take it. So from like the general outline we made in the beginning of this podcast about the type of audience we want to bring in, this doesn't serve a new type of audience. This serves the same type of people who knows how to conduct DeFi, who can now write those things out, and now it can be automated from predefined processes. So from that perspective, it completely fails where we're trying to get to. The second part of this is towards, like, as you mentioned, the security of it, the risk that comes with it. There's a reason why no one in the past 2 decades sent a text to their bank saying that take my $200 from my mortgage account and move it to another one. So I have difficulty understanding why this UX is enforced on crypto in the first place, because as you mentioned, typing out or even describing financial operations is not really the safe way to go. If you type SUI instead of say, you go into this operational overhead there is no coming back from. There are LLM wrappers and chat interfaces are great at orchestrating, but they are not suited yet for executing financial operations. For executing financial operations, the product strategy should be towards building more, as we mentioned, intent-driven models, where you start with a very high level user objective, such as I want to provide liquidity to X, or I want better yield on my BTC or ETH. And from that moment onwards, there is an automation that comes into play that handles all of the overhead for you. Now, this for the automation part, we go into the second part of this conversation, how you ensure that the automation and the intelligence you bring is within safe boundaries. For us, as the people who are chasing the second part of the product strategy that serves a wider audience, there are certain things that are non-negotiable. These things are security, trust, and control. While you provide intelligence and automation, these are the things that the user should still be very much feeling. A sense of control, a sense of security, a sense of trust. And these are, for us, engineering requirements and not just like buzzwords that we throw out there. So in our infrastructure, we allow for non-custodial automation. So once you go to Armada.xyz, for example, there is an account abstraction module. I know it's getting a bit more technical, but we first of all decouple the management of your wallets and the management of the funds that the agent is going to take over. And this takeover is done in a non-custodial fashion. You still keep your private keys. You still have your everything. Giza doesn't have access to your private keys. The agent doesn't have access to your private keys. So first, we decouple the management of the funds. And then comes the question of how do we ensure an agent operates within the right parameters and it doesn't go off wild and does something rogue. In our case, we have a primitive called session keys, and this allows us to cryptographically and mathematically and algorithmically bake certain guardrails into each agent. These guardrails can be: the agent can only interact with ABC protocols. The agent can only interact with XYZ smart contracts. The agent can only swap from A token to B token. And once these are baked in, the agent is bounded to stay within these operational limits. So as you provide intelligence, as you provide automation, as you take these high-level intents, there is still a protected environment the agent still operates within and cannot roam out of. And that is quite critical for us to provide to everyone that's using Giza.
And I know we could spend 3 more hours on that very topic right there, but I think you gave a good flavor of the engineering challenges that still remain and the types of things, that actions you're taking to crack those challenges. Along those lines, you mentioned ecosystem earlier. Talk a bit more about how injection of AI, how it can shift the ecosystem, and then what needs to happen for this to truly go mainstream, right? Because I'm guessing that, as I believe you said, realistically, the people who are exploring DeFi plus AI are pretty much the same hardcore degens who are doing DeFi with no AI, right? Mm-hmm. And if the injection of AI is meant to bring DeFi back to its roots, to let normies engage in this easier to use, elegant financial system, what has to happen to get there? Is it a tech issue that must be overcome? Is it a cultural shift? Is it education? Is it regulatory? What needs to happen for this user base to expand massively beyond the folks who are hanging out in crypto Twitter?
Yeah, for sure. Let's start with the ecosystem part, which you mentioned.
Perfect.
We have been discussing so far towards why agents are in play. What do they bring from the user perspective? And we are like creating this image where the autonomous agents, they are the main interface for blockchain interaction moving forward. The decentralized protocols, as we know it, are becoming very much a backend component. Nobody's going to go to Yearn, nobody's going to go to Morpho, nobody's going to go to Aave in a few months' time, and everything's going to be facilitated through the agent interfaces. And this creates a shift in how capital is deployed and managed across decentralized systems. Ecosystems that embrace this shift will capture the next wave of adoption. And because this next wave of adoption is going to very much bring this user type that you're outlining, it is going to bring improved capital efficiency. And the ecosystem that prioritizes agent adoption is going to see this massive increase in transaction volume and diversification. How is this going to happen? Is that we have this specific example of what Arma has been doing for Base in just 4 weeks, where Arma, through continuous capital optimization, has taken 500k and moved it first to Morpho, and then moved it to Moon, then moved it to Seamless. This capital continuously drove volume between different base protocols, and this happened with zero human intervention. And as a result of this, it put every single user in more profitable position than they were before. So from a user side, you get more profitability. From the protocol side, you get more volume. It creates this like win-win-win environment where users capture yield, whatever they want to. There is zero management of overhead, and there's also risk minimization that we discussed. For protocols, there is the increased transaction volume. There is enhanced capital efficiency because the agent's precise capital allocation optimizes things like utilization ratios across protocols, liquidity balances across protocols, and it also creates a competitive dynamic because our agents, they create a merit-based allocation system where protocols with the strongest fundamentals attract the most capital, and this is the foundation of like capital markets and how it should be. And as a protocol, the agents are going to become your primary capital allocators, and you need to optimize specifically for their operations. These will include like clear, consistent structures, designing tokenomics and market mechanisms that maximizes these things. For ecosystems like Base, if we take the capital management from a user who looks to preserve capital and give it to an agent that looks to optimize capital, what you're getting is 5 times, 10 times more volume from the same amount of capital. So the imminent future that Giza agents and financial instruments unlock is an ecosystem like Base doing 20 times more volume without having the need to acquire 20 times more users. And that has a huge avalanche effect to everything that we have discussed so far. There is network growth, obviously, there is enhanced composability, there is reduced friction in terms of how capital is flowing. And as an ecosystem, your new power users are agents. And ecosystems competing for agent deployment, they should prioritize maintaining predictable long transaction costs and designing for high true output and fostering a range of complementary DeFi instruments that the agents can utilize from. So from a user perspective, facilitate capital flow. From the backend protocol and ecosystem perspective, you get 10 times more volume, you get 10 times more network growth, you get capital diversity, you get liquidity efficiency that we have never seen before, which we didn't even dive into yet. But this is like the future that we are unlocking and moving towards.
I love that vision. I do want to briefly put just a bookmark here, and this could be a sequel conversation down the road. On a systemic front, is there almost a philosophical, secular, systemic question? Is there additional macro risk we're adding to the system, right? The risk we were discussing earlier was from a user perspective, is that AI going to send the funds to the wrong account? Or what they meant to say $1,000 in BTC and accidentally 10,000, things like that, right? But I'm thinking more along the lines of, in the same way that a couple of years ago, there were very cleverly and brilliant DeFi protocols that, thanks to one tiny mistake, somehow went haywire. You had algorithm meltdowns, system collapse, which kind of dominated other problems. Is there a risk of, however well-intentioned, a system, you have this kind of well-engineered system, and then you inject AI into it, and to your point, you supercharge the possible upside, yes, but is there additional risk of things having totally going haywire? How are you thinking about that systemic risk to the overall industry and space?
I think there's 2 ways you can go about it. You can take a reactive approach to innovation, and you can see where the chips fall, and you can play it a little bit more on the safer side, or you can be the type of project and individual that takes more a proactive approach and wants to push boundaries. I think in terms of where we are in 2025, We don't have the luxury to be in the first category. You have to be building for tomorrow. You cannot be building for yesterday. And DeFi's infrastructure has been stuck on yesterday for a very long time. There is no way of automating liquidity provision of a protocol that manages billions of fragmented liquidity across chains. There is no way of intelligently deploying ecosystem-owned TVL back to an ecosystem that will create a huge avalanche of positive network growth. And all of these things needs to be unlocked. And for me, the potential of implementing autonomy and intelligence as the foundational layer to DeFi is exponentially higher than the risk it embarks. At the same time, as we mentioned, there are non-negotiables in trust, minimization, in control, in security that needs to be baked in as engineering requirements. So we cannot just go YOLO into creating financial markets, because creating financial markets are very much taking care of a lot of different things that moves different directions at the same time. Be the right type of engineer, take into account risks and minimize trust where possible, but at the same time you build for tomorrow and you build for the future that you want to see unfold.
I know we're running a little low on time, so would love to hear from you a bit more about what's ahead for Giza, and then what excites you most about, maybe give us a prediction of what's of the space in like a year or so of this DeFi with an A world.
Yeah, DeFi with an A. For Giza, we are moving towards building more financial agents. Other teams building autonomous, intelligent businesses on top of Giza, which is one of the most exciting things. We have launched Arma because we really wanted to understand what is like the true blueprint of financial automation in this space. Now every other use case, where LRTs, arbitrage, delta neutral markets, is just one click away to make accessible to like millions and millions of people out there. This is one of the most exciting things of what we do, because we are seeing like the real impact of what we can create here. And we will fundamentally change how DeFi operates. We will fundamentally change how capital moves on blockchain. And some bold predictions: within a year, I think the majority of DeFi TVL will be managed by autonomous agents that continuously optimize positions, that continuously optimize protocol-owned, ecosystem-owned liquidity. We will see whole ecosystems being bootstrapped by agents and taken to a more mature place. We will see an emergence of agent-native protocols specifically designed for automated interaction like Giza. We will see agent-native tokens that specifically go towards agent operations. And for sure, the next billion-trillion-dollar innovation in crypto will be built on financial agent guardrails and infrastructures that bridges the gap between DeFi's potential and its accessibility.
Amazing. Renç, thank you so much for taking the time to demystify this tricky topic. Really enjoyed it. Best of luck to you and Giza going forward.
Thank you, Jeff. Pleasure.
Well, there you have it. Thanks again to Renç Korzay, the co-founder of Giza. And thank you again to my partner, Vana. Vana's vision is for user-owned AI through user-owned data in data marketplaces. And their mission is to be the world's first open protocol for data sovereignty. And thank you finally to you, dear listener. Again, the People's AI is brand new, so please help us spread the word. Subscribe on the usual podcast platforms, YouTube, Apple, Spotify, all that good stuff. Post on social, post on X. If you have friends into DeFi, please send this. Spread the word. Thanks again, and see you next time.